that President Trump signed seeking to crack down on vote by mail. It's a move that would give the Postal Service an unprecedented role in the midterm elections, not only delivering ballots, but now policing who gets one. The Trump administration is demanding that states hand over lists of all voters set to receive mail-in ballots in the midterms. The order has already cleared one initial legal hurdle after a D.C. federal judge declined to block Trump's executive order, allowing the Postal Service to begin implementing it. 23 states and the District of Columbia are suing the Trump administration to stop these new rules. They're warning that voters across the country could and will be disenfranchised if the proposal is enacted. In a statement, the White House says the administration will, quote, continue lawfully enacting the agenda President Trump was elected to enact, which includes the safety and security of American elections, unquote. The order, we should note, is one of several recent moves President Trump has made to exert federal control over elections in states and restrict mail-in voting, which over the years he has repeatedly cast as a tool for cheating, despite no evidence of any widespread voter fraud. And there are a number of these moves that, taken together, have many experts wondering just what the Trump administration might be planning for the fall, for the midterm elections. Now, let me explain. This month, the Justice Department hired an election denier who tried to help Trump overturn his 2020 election loss. His name is Kurt Olson. He's now working in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. He was first appointed as a special government employee back in October of last year, serving as the presidentially appointed Director of Election Security and Integrity, which is, you might note, a curious role for someone whom in the days leading up to the January 6, 2021, allegedly drafted an executive order that would have directed the Justice Department to, quote, take voter action, and who held multiple private phone calls with Trump on January 6, according to the House committee that investigated the riot. In March of last year, we should also note, a federal appeals court affirmed an order for Olson and another attorney to pay more than $120,000 in legal fees for what a judge called a false and misleading lawsuit, claiming that the Arizona voting machines had been subject to manipulation. You might remember in January, the FBI raided the Fulton County Election Center in Atlanta, during which we also saw then Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard on site for some reason. Now, it turns out the person who referred that warrant to the FBI is none other than Kurt Olson. Here's the affidavit used in the search warrant. It shows that Olson is the one who made the referral. Now, after that raid, a Reuters investigation revealed that Tulsi Gabbard, then the Director of National Intelligence, also led an investigation into Puerto Rico's voting machines, looking into claims that Venezuela hacked voting machines in Puerto Rico. It's a probe that did not produce any clear evidence of Venezuelan interference at all, sources told Reuters. Reuters also reported that Olson pushed a U.S. intelligence contractor, Mojave Research, to search for evidence of vulnerabilities in the machines. The Office of National Intelligence claimed to find extremely concerning cybersecurity and operational practices, but that's a claim for which they have yet to provide any detailed evidence. Also, after that FBI Fulton County raid in Atlanta, the CIA confirmed that President Trump has ordered intelligence agencies to cooperate with Kurt Olson's investigation into the 2020 election and voting machines. Why exactly would the president want claims of election fraud to be an intelligence matter? Why? Well, consider this. One, Kurt Olson's new role within the Justice Department. Two, this attack on mail-in voting. Three, the appointment of, as acting Director of National Intelligence, a man with no intelligence or national security experience, a guy named Bill Pulte, best known for weaponizing mortgage information against the president's perceived enemies from his perch at Fannie Mae Freddie Mac. All of this raising very serious questions among experts in the intelligence community about whether something larger is being planned for the midterm, something involving voting machines, vote by mail, intelligence of questionable veracity from Kurt Olson or Bill Pulte, or, as a senior member of the intelligence community told me, quote, there is a very real concern among experts that the Trump administration is under-resourcing our defense against foreign threats to the elections while focusing its attention almost exclusively on matters of domestic politics, including potentially interfering in the 2026 midterms. Now, I say all this advisedly. If President Trump and his allies had not made attempts to undo the 2020 election, leading up to the disgrace of January 6, 2021, maybe one could think these are all unconnected data points. But honestly, making any such assumption today would be horribly naive and irresponsible. We are going to continue to cover this issue. We have with us in studio John Avlon and Margaret Hoover. And John, let me start with you. The Secretary of State of Oregon, one of the states suing to stop this order about mail, the U.S. Postal Service, says this would deny eligible people the right to vote, full stop. How do you see it?
It's not of how I see it. It's where the facts are. The facts are it would. Oregon has vote by mail, has for a long time. This is not legal. It's not constitutional.
This order
is not legal. This executive order is not legal. It's not constitutional. States run elections in the United States of America. And for the president and his administration to say it's legal, to give the Orwellian name to the guy who had tried to overturn the last election, now overseeing election integrity, just underscores how cynical and sinister this is. And that's an objective characterization of what's happening. If a Democratic president were doing this exact same thing, Republicans would be absolutely up in arms, and they'd be right. But that's the dynamic we see over and over. They are trying to interfere with free elections and violating the law and Constitution to do it, and everyone needs to be wide awake, and thank you for covering it in the detail you just did.
So, Margaret, a White House spokesperson says, quote, the administration remains confident that the executive order will be implemented by the November election, which was always the intent when it was signed. President Trump, again, of course, was vehemently against mail-in ballots in the 2020 election during the COVID epidemic. He lost that race. We should note he also voted by mail in 2020. And at least one other time in March.
We should also note that if he had embraced mail-in voting, he might have won.
Right.
So I think it's misplaced. Look, what we know about mail-in voting, and there are 4 states that do 100% mail-in voting.
Like Utah.
Oregon, Utah, which is
nobody ever complains about Utah.
No one ever complains about Utah. And I have gone out to Utah to examine actually the drop boxes and to talk to the election administrators in Utah for a documentary I did for PBS on election integrity last year. We have the safest, the fairest, the most transparent systems, by the way, in 10,000 jurisdictions across this country of any country in the world. We don't have an election day. We have 10,000 election days on the same day in America. And it's extraordinary that it works as well as it does. But the kind of planning that went into 100% mail-in voting in Colorado and Utah and Oregon and Washington State takes an enormous amount of time to plan for with the U.S. Postal Service, as an agency that